And so we have reached a truly historic moment in American politics and elections. The third and final presidential debate of the 2016 season. The last time we will watch as Donald Trump stalks Hillary Clinton. The final time we will watch and listen as Hillary Clinton smirks and cackles her way through numerous allegations. And even now we need to consider where this treasured concept goes from here. And if sanity will ever again reign in the lead up to selecting the individual that will either keep the world peace or prove that Dr. Strangelove was more of a prediction than a movie character. Always a pleasure to welcome back the real doctor, presidential historian, political analyst, prolific author of such New York Times bestsellers as Last Act, The Final Years and Emerging Legacy of Ronald Reagan, author of the forthcoming book in February of 2017, Reagan Rising, The Decisive Years, 1976-1980, Craig Shirley. All right, Mr. Shirley, we're not going to be riding any atomic bombs from the belly of a plane down to the bottom of the ground right here now. Although goodness knows the way things have been going, I swear Slim Pickens is somewhere going, I'm ready to ride again, the way this year has gone.
Or are you saying, I told you so?
Or say, I told you so. You're exactly right. All right, here you go. As a historian, 20 years from now, people will look back at the election of 2016. What do you think they'll say?
They'll think it is maybe it's a remake of Star Wars, only it's Darth Vader versus Jabba the Hutt. This is truly a low point. We've never seen this before, Ed. I've said it before. We're on uncharted territory, but we can see, the end, the end of the tunnel is in sight, and thank God. This is one of the most uninspiring, unintellectual, unimaginative, foul campaigns that I certainly can remember. You probably certainly can remember. Certainly in this century, is that every presidential election over the course of the last 100 years has tried to elevate the debate, and there were some worthy debates. I think of Kennedy and Nixon and Carter and Reagan, and even Bush and Dukakis tried to advance principles and ideas that they thought were best suited to the American people. This is an election unlike no election before, in which the candidates almost exclusively don't talk about the American people. They simply talk about themselves. That's the fault of the consultants. It's also just happens, look, we can't always nominate a Lincoln or a Madison. Sometimes you've got to nominate real dogs. And it just so happens this time around we nominated two real dogs.
All right, let's be painfully honest here. You and I have been that in all the time that we have spoken here. You used words such as uninspiring and unintellectual. And then one of the words you used was fault. I'm going to put those all together then. Whose fault is it that these debates have been uninspiring and unintellectual? Is it the candidates or is it the voters who want what they want?
It's not the voters. Look, Donald Trump got the nomination. Actually, it's a pretty easy formulation. If you stake out radical populist territory, and you are already a celebrity, by virtue of your wealth in New York City and everything else, is that you can average in a 17-candidate field, you can get the nomination averaging 32% of the vote. This is the way the Republican National Committee and Reince Priebus set it up, and it is their fault. It is the fault of the Republican National Committee for trying to game the system so that one of their own, an insider moderate, would win. And in fact, just the opposite happens, which was what the great economist Milton Friedman often said about bureaucracies and systems, is that, as Adam Smith talked about the invisible hand of the marketplace, bureaucracies often produce the invisible foot of bureaucracy and government, and so the exact opposite happens. So this is the fault, and it's just deserves for the Republican National Committee for trying to manhandle the system.
Isn't it fair to say that when words like rigged and fixed are used, which quite frankly should not be used, have no place in an election such as this, it brings about more fear than anything else? Should we not go back to the phrase that you just used, game the system? Because this has been going on now for decades. And that's why we have what we have at the moment, because everybody, be it left, right, middle, wherever you want, they're looking for ways to make it work for them. And that is gaming the system, and that's working the system from the bottom up.
There's a difference, yes, but there's a difference, I believe, between gaming the system and questioning the system. And as conservatives, it is our intellectual responsibility. Back in the 60s, the liberals' mantra was question authority. Now it's defend authority. Whereas conservatives are back to where they should have been all along, which is to really question authority. So it is perfectly legitimate for Donald Trump to question the voting systems, because we have had fraud in the past, going back to the election of John Quincy Adams over Andrew Jackson and the corrupt bargain. We've seen elections stolen before. Is that Texas was at least stolen for John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson in 1960, just as Chicago voted dead bodies. Is that in 1984, Minnesota went for Mondale by the narrowest of margin, in part because they voted dead Indians in the northern part of Minnesota. So corruption and voting is not unknown in our American political system. And so for Donald Trump, this is one of the few things that I actually agree with Trump on, is for him to raise warnings is actually intellectually consistent with the principles as conservatives, and it puts everybody on notice, which is also a good idea.
Let's look at debates again, Craig. What we have seen here in the first two debates and this third debate that we're all going to be talking about now for weeks, how do you believe it will change the future dynamics of debates, seeing as this Pandora's box has been opened? You can't just put it all back and go, let's have a nice normal debate like we used to, kids. It's not going to work anymore.
No, and in an odd sort of way is that we're probably going to see even more debates, because guess what? They're great for ratings. Look at the ratings these networks and cable systems are getting off of the debates in the presidential primaries, and now the debates between Hillary and Donald Trump. The ratings tonight will be off the scale. Look, the largest single audience for a presidential debate is still 1980 Carter-Reagan. Not only was it 88 to 90 million people, but it also is a share, because we're in a nation then of 200 million people. Now, if you're getting 80 million people, it's 1/3 of the national audience, because the national audience is 325 million people. So, as a percentage and as a share, is that still 1980 was the most watched television debate in American history. But I'm confident that TV runs everything. TV. Marshall McLuhan was right. The message is, the medium is the message, and that the very act of television broadcasting is now dominating the decision-making process of presidential debates.
I got about 2 minutes left. Let's look at something else. The Obama administration in their two elections, the Obama campaigns, did a very good job with social media when it was in its infancy. Great job. Donald Trump is the one who has come in and taken it to a new level. Is it not fair to say that no matter where we go from here, social media is going to be a deciding point, and candidates are going to be jumping all over this now because they've seen what Trump can do? And if they don't do it, if they don't get the social media angle in all this, they're going to lose badly.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and quite honestly, I believe it's a good thing, and I think you do too, is that competition in communication, like competition and everything else, is a good thing. Is that the newspapers and the networks' day is dying, their influence is waning, which is why they're becoming more radicalized as they try to hold on to aging liberal viewers. But is that they always had too much power. There's always too much power concentrated in ABC, NBC, and CBS, and a few big city newspapers. Is that what we're seeing now is a new, communications order, so to speak, and that people can communicate their message the way they want without having it filtered by a liberal or a biased media.
And I think it's fair to say, too, that as we move on, let's face it, we get a little older, but guess what? There's those teens and 20s and 30s. They've been bathed in social media. They don't know any other way to get their news. So very quickly, I only got 20 seconds left. That's what you got to focus on.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Is that there is something to be said for voting behavior. Is that there was a whole crop of young people in 1980 and 84 who voted for Reagan because they were attracted to his optimistic message, who have become, now there's a bubble of people in middle age and advancing who remained Republican because they first started out voting for Ronald Reagan. So you want to capture people early because it kind of it brands them.
Get them early, exactly. And here's an early note. Last Act, The Final Years and Emerging Legacy of Ronald Reagan. His new book set to hit stores February 2017, Reagan Rising, the Decisive Years 1976-1980. Craig Shirley, always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks for joining us. Our special coverage of the presidential debate will continue.